CSS Lesson 2, more on CSS. There are a couple HTML elements that are very useful when using CSS. The first element is the div element. Divs are used to create logical divisions in your web page. They can be used to divide the page up into large sections like heading, navigation, and page content, and footer. Each named section can then be styled differently using CSS. Divs are block elements. They can contain other block elements like headings, paragraphs, or other divs, but they should not be inside of other block elements like paragraphs and headings. In the example, a div is surrounding an unordered list that will be used for navigation, so it has been ID'd nav. The span element is very similar to the div element, except for the span is an inline element and should be used to style words or phrases. The span should only be used inside of another element. In the example, span is used to apply a subhead class to a part of the heading. There are several other ways to add styles to a specific element. As we saw in Lesson 1, you can use the style attribute to add CSS directly to the tag. You can also use the ID and class attributes to add a style name to a tag. What's the difference between ID and class? Well, ID attributes must be unique. You cannot have the same ID twice on the same page. Classes do not need to be unique. You can use the same class multiple times in multiple elements on the same page. The example shows an ID applied to an H1 and a class applied to a div. Each of these is referenced slightly different in the CSS. As we saw in Lesson 1, CSS is written with a selector followed by a declaration block. In Lesson 1, the selectors were always HTML tag name. For IDs, you want to put a pound sign followed by the ID value as the selector. In the example, the pound warning will refer to the ID where the value is warning on our HTML page. For classes, you put a dot followed by the class name. For instance, .example. ID and class names must be one word. You can use dashes or underscores to make them more readable. Pseudo-classes can be used to add special effects to some selectors. The most common is the anchor, which has 4 pseudo-classes: link, visited, hover, and active. Each of these can be styled differently. Selectors can also be combined. In the first example, only strong tags inside of a paragraph will be styled. In the second example, only LIs inside of an element ID'd nav will be styled bold. In the third example, only H1s inside of an example class will be styled with a border bottom. External style sheets are plain text documents that end in .css. For external style sheets, you can use the same format for your CSS as you did in an internal style sheet. You just don't need the style tag. You can link to an external style sheet using the link tag. The link tag goes inside the head. Below is an example. Alternatively, an external style sheet can be imported using the @import inside the style. Like all other links we've talked about in this class, the URL can be absolute or relative. Now let's look at some CSS. First, backgrounds. Background color is used to add a background color to an element, class, or ID. Its value can be color name, an RGB value, a hex color, inherit, or transparent. The example shows a background color applied to the body tag, an About Me ID, and an example class. Background image allows you to add a background image to an element ID or class. To specify, you type URL, parentheses, and then the path to image. The path could be an absolute or relative URL. These examples show only relative URLs. There are 3 properties that allow you to control the behavior of your background image. Background repeat controls how your background image will repeat. It can repeat in both X and Y, repeat X only, repeat Y only, no repeat, or inherit. Background position specifies the position of the background. you specify two values here. First, the horizontal position, then the vertical position. It can be specified using the predefined keywords a %x and a %y, the x position, y position in pixels, or inherit. Background attachment defines whether the picture scrolls with the page or not. Its values are scroll, fixed, and inherit. The example shows a background image where the background repeat and background position have been specified. Background is a shorthand for all of the background properties. The properties should be specified in the following order: background color, background image, background repeat, background attachment, and background position. In the blue box is an example of a background applied to the body. There are also several properties for lists. List style image specifies an image to use as the bullet. The value has the same format as the background image. List style position specifies whether the marker should appear inside or outside the flow of content. The values are inside, outside, and inherit. List style type specifies the type of marker. For unordered lists, the choices are none, circle, disk, or square. For ordered lists, the choices are none, Armenian, decimal, decimal leading 0, Georgian, lower alpha, lower Greek, lower Latin, lower Roman, upper alpha, upper Latin, and upper Roman. List style is a shortcut for the list style properties. List style type should be specified first, followed by list style location, and finally list style image. You can think of an HTML element as a box. The box can have a width, a height, padding, borders, and margins. Padding is the space between the content and the edge of the box. It can be specified as a length or a %. The padding can be specified individually. Padding dash top, right, bottom, or left will specify the padding for only that side of the box. Padding is a shortcut property. The values are specified clockwise starting at the top, so top, right, bottom, then left. If you specify only one value, it will be applied to all four sides. Margin specifies the space between the edge of the box and the next element. Like padding, its value can be length or %. It can also be specified individually or as a shortcut margin. There are several properties used to specify a border. Border width specifies the thickness of the border. Border style indicates whether the border will be dotted, dashed, solid, double, grooved, ridged, inset, outside, or none. Border color specifies the color. It can be a color name, an RGB value, or an hex value. Border is a shortcut for all these border styles. It should be specified in the order of border width, then border style, finally border color. Like padding and margin, each side can be specified individually. In the first example, style, width, and color are specified separately for the border bottom. In the second example, the border bottom shortcut is used. First the width, then the style, finally the color are specified. Width and height can be specified in pixels or %. Alternatively, you can specify a min width and a min height, or a max width and a max height. Finally, overflow specifies what happens if the content overflows the edge of the box. This is only relevant if you specified one of the width and height properties. Overflow values can be visible, hidden, scroll, auto, or inherit.